The air smelled of blood, though none had yet been spilled. The banners of House Stark fluttered proudly over the camp pitched just outside the twins, and the men of the north were laughing, drinking, sharing meat and fire. They thought peace was near, a union of houses, a wedding, a promise kept at last. But Roose Bolton knew better. He sat alone in his tent, the candlelight flickering against his pale, unreadable face. The words of Lord Tywin's raven echoed in his head, darker than any winter night. The command was clear: let it happen. Betray the young wolf, cleanse the north of rebellion. The Freys would do the cutting. Roose would pick through the ashes, and yet something festered inside Roose, something he hadn't felt in years. A bitter taste, a sense that he had become just another Lannister dog. He looked down at his hands, still bloodless, but not for long if he did nothing. His son Ramsay would have slit Robb's throat without blinking. But Roose remembered the look in Catelyn Stark's eyes when she begged for peace. He remembered the honor of House Stark, naive maybe, but still pure, unstained, something the Lannisters had never understood. The candle burned lower. His mind burned hotter. By midnight he had made his choice. He strode through the night into Robb's command tent. Grey Wind growled low in the shadows, and Catelyn looked up, her face drawn from worry and weariness. Robb, standing over a map of Westeros, lifted his eyes. "Lord Bolton," Robb said, puzzled. "Is something wrong?" Roose shut the flap behind him and stepped closer. His voice was low, colder than the Dreadfort's walls. "You cannot attend this wedding?" Robb blinked. "What?" Roose didn't flinch. "The Freys planned treachery, under Tywin Lannister's orders. Once you and your men are inside the twins, they'll lock the gates, butcher your army, and hang your direwolf's head from the walls." The silence was instant and thick. Catelyn froze. Robb's expression cracked, and for a heartbeat he looked like a boy again, not a king. Then his hand found the hilt of his sword. "Why should I believe you?" he asked, voice sharp. "You swore allegiance to House Stark. If you've broken that oath—" "I haven't," Roose cut him off. "Not yet." Robb stared into Rose's eyes, and in them he saw no lies, only something worse: truth. Cold, bitter, undeniable truth. Catelyn spoke, her voice trembling. "Why warn us now?" Roose turned to her. "Because I can live with being feared. But I cannot live as a puppet. Not for the Lannisters." Robb exhaled, a sound between fury and relief. "We need a plan," he said quickly. "They'll expect us tomorrow. If we don't show up, it'll be war." "It already is," Catelyn whispered. "It always was." Robb turned to his men. Grey Wind came to his side, sensing the tension, and growled toward the darkness. "Send scouts, quietly. I want eyes on every tower, every guard. If the twins are armed, I want to know it before dawn." "And the wedding?" Roose asked. Robb Stark, king in the north, looked toward the horizon. His voice was like ice cracking under fire. "The wedding is off." The dawn broke pale and thin, casting a weak light over the dew-covered camp outside the twins. But there was no cheer in the morning air. Robb Stark had gathered his commanders in the largest tent, each man cloaked in steel and suspicion. The mood was grim. Lord Karstark, grim-faced and hollow-eyed from weeks of mourning his sons, was the first to speak. "We ride all this way, swallow our pride for the Freys, and now we turn our backs? We look weak, my king." Robb leaned over the map, his fingers pressing into the riverlands. "Would you prefer to be slaughtered at a feast like fattened cattle?" "The Freys have numbers," Lord Edmure said. "We're still low on men after the Whispering Wood and Duskendale. They could lock us in from both sides of the crossing." "They would have locked us in," Catelyn corrected sharply. "Roose has given us the chance to act first. That's a gift we don't waste." All eyes fell on Roose Bolton, who stood near the entrance, quiet as a ghost. He hadn't said a word since his warning. Even now he kept his face unreadable. "You say they meant to kill us," said Great Janumber, his voice like thunder. "So what now, my king? Do we march on the twins? Draw swords on a wedding party?" Robb stared down at the map again. His mouth was a tight line, his mind racing. "We can't turn back without losing face. But we can't walk into the twins either. That's suicide. What if we bait them?" Catelyn asked softly. The men turned toward her. "What if we give the Freys a taste of their own plan?" She continued. "Make them think we're coming as promised. Let them ready their knives. Then when they least expect it, we strike." Roose raised an eyebrow. "You'd risk the chaos of attacking the twins? Would you rather wait for them to slit our throats at the table?" Silence settled like snow. Robb stood straight, his eyes burning now with a fire that had dimmed since the death of Talisa and the long months of war. "No, we do this. If they've declared war with wine cups and blades hidden in cloaks, then so be it. But we strike first, tonight." Catelyn looked at her son, fear flickering behind her pride. "This isn't the war you planned." "No," Robb said, "but it's the one we have." That evening, as the sun dipped low, the Stark camp stirred like a silent beast. Riders disguised as wedding envoys were sent ahead to the Freys, bearing gifts and lies. Robb made sure they carried a message of apology and celebration, a false peace wrapped in gold. Meanwhile, hidden under cloaks and hay, his best men moved with stealth, circling the twins. At the edge of the river, Aryan Forrester, one of Robb's scouts, returned breathless, blood on his sleeve. "They've doubled the guards at the gate towers," he panted. Steel under their robes, crossbows lined on the walls. "They're ready to spring the trap." Robb clenched his fists. "Then we'll close it on them." As darkness thickened, the attack plan unfolded. Archers took positions on the riverbanks. Great John Umber's men crept through the woods flanking the twins, ready to breach through the servants' route, a hidden passage Roose Bolton had slyly revealed. At midnight, the drums began to beat from inside the twins. The Freys had started the wedding feast. Laughter echoed faintly across the river. Lord Edmure's wedding was underway, and he, unaware of the impending bloodbath, sat drinking beside his blushing Frey bride. Inside the walls, the Freys waited with poisoned smiles, hands on daggers beneath their sleeves. Outside, the North waited with drawn swords, hearts filled with fury. Catelyn stood by Robb's side. She gripped his hand tightly. "Are you ready, my son?" she asked. He didn't answer at first. He looked toward the stone towers, their windows glowing warm and false like lanterns leading to slaughter. "They tried to murder the North," he said finally. "Let's show them what happens when the North remembers." With that, Robb mounted his horse, raised his sword, and gave the signal. And so began the night the Freys would never forget, and the wedding that never happened. The first arrow flew silently through the night and found its mark in a Frey sentry's throat. He collapsed backward over the parapet without a sound, his body swallowed by the darkness below. Seconds later, the sky lit up with fire as torches were launched across the riverbanks, flames licking the air in a deadly rhythm. Chaos erupted within the twins. The musicians playing stumbled to a stop. Laughter twisted into screams as a second guard fell dead into a platter of roasted boar. Frey soldiers reached for their swords, but it was too late. Great Umber's men burst through the servant tunnels beneath the keep, steel flashing in the torchlight. They struck with brutal precision, cutting down guards before they could raise an alarm. The Freys had expected sheep. What they got was the North in open rage. Robb and his bannermen charged through the eastern gate after smashing it down with a makeshift battering ram, riding hard into the courtyard. Grey Wind led the pack, snarling and tearing through panicked Frey soldiers like parchment. Above them, banners burned. The twin towers of House Frey caught the glow of torches and fire arrows, casting an eerie glow over the stone. Robb dismounted in a rush and stormed into the great hall with a small unit at his back. The door crashed open. The scene inside was frozen in disbelief. Walder Frey sat at the high table, flanked by his sons, gaping at the carnage unfolding beyond his walls. Lord Edmure, his mouth full of wine and confusion, stood from his seat. "What in the name of the Seven is happening?" Catelyn followed Robb in, her blade drawn. She moved like a storm given shape, her eyes locked onto Walder Frey. "You meant to kill my son," she spat. Walder narrowed his eyes, his wrinkled face twitching. "You should have kept your oaths. This is what happens when honor breaks." Robb didn't hesitate. He raised his sword and pointed it at Walder. "And this is what happens when you try to murder a king." One of the Frey sons lunged forward with a dagger, but before he could reach Catelyn, Grey Wind burst through the doorway, leaping over tables and chairs to sink his teeth into the man's neck. Screams rang out as guests ran for the exits. Steel clashed. The hall became a battlefield. Stark loyalists clashed with Frey men as food and blood soaked the same floor. Catelyn fought like a lioness, slashing at anyone who came near Robb. Outside, the flames were spreading. Arrows rained from the walls as northern soldiers took the fight room by room. Roose Bolton, overseeing the west side of the assault, moved efficiently, almost mechanically. He stabbed and stepped, always silent, always cold. He knew that if they failed, there would be no mercy from the Lannisters, and no future for House Bolton either. His betrayal had to be complete, and it had to be bloody. Back in the hall, Robb faced off against Black Walder Frey. The two men circled each other amid the chaos, swords clashing in a storm of sparks. Black Walder was fierce, but rage gave Robb strength, the kind that couldn't be taught. "You should have knelt," Black Walder growled as their blades locked. "You should have run," Robb replied before driving his sword through the Frey's gut. The old Lord Walder was grabbed by two Stark soldiers and dragged forward. He fought them with the strength of a dying rat, wheezing and cursing. "You'll doom the North again," he spat. "You think the Lannisters will forgive this? You think they'll let you live?" Robb looked down at the man who had plotted his death, who had laughed over the thought of slaughtering men who came offering peace. "They'll try," he said, voice low, "and they'll fail." And with that he nodded. One of the soldiers raised his sword and brought it down. Walder Frey's head rolled across the floor, coming to rest beside a spilled goblet of wine. As the sun rose, the fires at the twins smouldered into embers. The massacre had been stopped, reversed even. The northern army, bloodied but victorious, stood in the ruins of what was meant to be their grave. Catelyn stood beside Robb on the parapet, looking down at the smoke curling from the broken walls. "This will not go unanswered," she said softly. Robb nodded. "I know, but we're alive," she said. He looked at her, eyes tired but resolute. "For now." The bodies were still being burned when the first raven left the twins. It flew fast, westward, bearing grim news sealed in black wax. "House Frey has fallen. The young wolf lives." By the time it reached King's Landing, Tywin Lannister was sitting with a goblet of Arbor gold, already convinced Robb Stark was dead. He cracked the seal, read the message once, then again, his jaw tightening with each line. The cup slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. "Fetch me the small council," he said coldly. "Now." Back in the Riverlands, the Northmen buried their dead beneath a cold sky. Hundreds had fallen. Loyal bannermen, who never lived to see their survival, turned into a miracle. They stacked the Freys separately, their corpses burned without honor. The smell clung to everything. Robb stood outside the great hall, now nothing more than a charred husk of stone and timber. A fresh scar cut across his cheek from the melee. He hadn't slept, neither had Catelyn. Lord Edmure sat nearby, staring blankly into a bowl of untouched stew. His Frey bride was gone, disappeared during the chaos. Whether she'd fled or died, no one could say for sure. Robb approached Roose Bolton, who was watching the soldiers clear the debris. "You saved us," Robb said. Roose turned slightly. "Don't thank me. I chose the path that kept my house alive." "And you chose right," Robb replied, though there was a weight in his voice. "You know the Lannisters will come now." "They already march," Roose said. "They won't let this insult go unanswered. You killed a Lannister ally, wiped out an entire house. They'll use it to rally the realm against you." Catelyn joined them, arms crossed. "Then we must rally first." "But how?" Robb asked. "We've just barely survived. We're tired, half-starved, winter is close. We can't fight the Lannisters alone." "You won't be alone," came a gruff voice. Great Jon Umber stepped forward, armor bloodied and face bruised. Behind him, the other lords of the north began to gather. Mormont, Glover, Karstark, Serwyn, Reed. "We followed you to the twins because we believed in the king in the north," Umber continued. "You didn't lead us to death. You led us to a victory so loud, the south will hear it for generations. You bleed for us, Robb Stark, we will bleed for you." Roose didn't say it, but even he gave a subtle nod. Catelyn blinked back a tear. It was the first time she had seen such unity since the march south began. But Robb wasn't comforted. His eyes drifted to the Raven Coop. Then we must send a message, he said. To the Vale, to Riverrun, even to Dawn if they'll hear us. What message? Asked Lord Glover. Robb looked over the burned bodies of his men at the wreckage of the hall that was supposed to kill him. That the North lives, he said. That the Lion failed. That House Stark stands. Far to the east, in Dragonstone, Stannis Baratheon read the same raven that had shaken Tywin. He sat alone by a fire, Melisandre at his side. The flames flickered in her red eyes. The boy cheated death, Stannis muttered. Walder Frey couldn't kill him. Tywin couldn't plan him into a grave. Perhaps the gods do favor him. The flames show us many things, Melisandre replied, watching the fire dance. But some lights burn too brightly. If the boy becomes king for real, your war will change. Stannis frowned. Let it change. I am the rightful king, not some wolf pup with a wounded pride. Melisandre did not smile. The true war is still ahead, and it is not for thrones. In King's Landing, Tywin Lannister assembled his council. They struck first, he told them. The North murdered the Freys, my allies. They defied a peace that was already agreed upon. Varys folded his hands. And yet, from what I hear, the Freys had prepared quite the betrayal. The North simply struck faster. Tywin glared. I don't care what you hear. The realm will hear what I tell them. We say the North rebelled again. We say they slaughtered a wedding party under guest rights. That's treason of the highest order. Cersei sipped wine. What do? We kill them all, Tywin said. By the end of the week, 300 Lannister bannermen had been called to arms. Gold flowed like blood from Casterly Rock. A southern storm was rising. And Robb Stark, sitting beneath a torn Stark banner at the Twins, stared toward the south and whispered to himself, So it begins again. The snow began to fall heavier now. Tiny flakes at first, but enough to whisper the truth. Winter was no longer coming. It had arrived. The riverlands were drowning in grey. Crops withered. Rivers froze along the banks. Villagers huddled behind broken walls, praying to gods old and new, as news of the Red Wedding's reversal spread like wildfire. The Freys were dead. The North had lived. The war wasn't over. It had just been reborn. Robb Stark rode out from the ruined Twins with his mother and bannermen, taking what supplies they could. The fortress was stripped bare. Every barrel of grain, every piece of armor, every surviving Frey weapon now belonged to the North. They left behind scorched banners and a warning nailed into the wooden gates. The North remembers. At Riverrun, Robb reunited with Brynden Tully the Blackfish, who had held the castle through siege and famine. His face, gaunt and tired, lit with pride when he saw his nephew alive. I thought I'd lost you, lad, the Blackfish said, clapping Robb on the shoulder. When the ravens stopped flying, I feared the worst. You were right to, Robb replied. But we were faster than their knives. Catelyn embraced her uncle, tears glistening in her eyes. The Freys are finished, uncle, but Tywin won't rest. No, Brynden agreed grimly. He never does. Inside the war room, maps were unfurled again. Familiar ground, yet everything had changed. The River Lords, once hesitant, now pledged renewed fealty to Robb. The slaughter that hadn't happened had lit a fire under every house who'd once doubted his crown. But something darker simmered underneath the banners and oaths: exhaustion. We need allies beyond the neck, Robb told them. We can't hold against the Lannisters in the Reach without help. We could send word to the Vale, Catelyn suggested. Lysa's still holed up in the area like a frightened bird, but she might act now. She's your aunt. I don't trust her, Robb muttered. But maybe fear will move her. Roose Bolton stepped forward. And what of the Ironborn? The Greyjoys took Deepwood Motte and still hold Moat Cailin. If they control the neck, they'll cut off your retreat to the north. They'll cut off more than that, Lord Karstark spat. They'd sell us to the Lannisters if it gave them another ship. Robb's eyes narrowed. Then we take Moat Cailin back. Catelyn looked at her son, worried. You'd march north now, with Tywin mustering in the west. I'll leave a force at Riverrun, he said, but I have to free the neck. If the Lannisters block us there, we'll be trapped, too far south, too spread out, too vulnerable. And who leads the south? Rose asked slowly. Silence stretched. No one offered. Then Robb looked at Catelyn. You will. Her eyes widened. Me? You're a Tully. You're respected in the Riverlands. More than any lord here. I trust no one else to hold them together while I take the fight north." She hesitated, not out of fear, but knowing what the burden meant, what she might lose again. "I'll hold it," she said at last. "But don't ride into another storm, Robb. You've escaped death once. It may not happen again," he smiled faintly. "Then I'll make sure it doesn't need to." The march north was brutal. Frozen ground made every step a grind. The men were weary, wrapped in furs and silence. Wolves howled at night, but grey wind stayed close to Robb's side. The direwolf was uneasy. The road was too quiet. When they reached the neck, they saw why. Moat Cailin was a fortress of death. Ironborn banners flew high, and the swamps around it were filled with hidden traps and sharpened stakes. The Greyjoys had turned it into a chokehold. Scouts returned with grim news. They fortified the western tower. Crossbows, spikes, no way through without heavy losses. Robb looked at the ruined marshlands and the walls beyond them. "We don't go through," he said. "We go under." He summoned Howland Reed of Greywater Watch, one of Ned Stark's oldest and most trusted allies. The Reeds knew the neck like wolves knew the woods. "We'll guide your best men through the bog," Howland said. "But they must be silent. One wrong step and they'll vanish into the mud." Robb nodded. "I'll go with them." Rose frowned. "A king doesn't crawl through swamps." "This one does," Robb answered. "They tried to kill me in a feast hall. I won't let them trap me again." Under moonlight, the northern strike force slipped through the fog. The reeds hissed with wind. Insects bit flesh. Men sank to their knees in black water. But they kept moving, guided by the reeds. By dawn, they were inside the moat, and by mid-morning the Ironborn were dead. Robb stood over their broken banner, dripping wet and covered in muck. He tore the Kraken flag down with his own hands and raised the direwolf of Stark over the battlements. The north was open again, but as the winds howled louder and ravens scattered across the sky, a chill passed through Robb's spine. He had won another battle, but the war was far from done. Snow fell like ash over the ramparts of Moat Cailin. The storm hadn't let up for days, turning the swamps into frozen sludge and slowing the army's movement to a crawl. But Robb Stark stood tall atop the battlements, his cloak billowing in the cold wind, the Stark banner now flying proud where the Greyjoy Kraken had once hung. He had done what few thought possible, driven out the Ironborn from the neck, retaken the most vital crossing into the north, and lived through a betrayal that was supposed to kill him. But Robb's eyes carried no pride, only weariness and a growing shadow. Roose Bolton joined him on the wall, his boots crunching quietly on the frost. "You've won the neck," Rose said. "But the Lannisters have won something else, the realm's ear. Word from the south is they're calling the Frey slaughter a betrayal of guest right. Tywin's painted you as a butcher of brides and old men." Robb's jaw tightened. "And yet it was them who planned to butcher me." "Yes," Rose agreed coldly. "But truth matters less than timing, and Tywin controls the tongues in every court that matters." Robb turned from the wall and looked toward the north. The mountains of the Vale rose faintly in the distance, barely visible through the flurries. "Beyond them, Winterfell, home. Then we take back our truth," he said. "And we start by taking back Winterfell." Rose paused. "Are you sure that's wise?" "It's been burned. The Boltons were ordered to hold it after Theon's rebellion, but Ramsay has taken liberties. You may not like what you find." Robb's eyes darkened. "It's my home, and I'll take it back with fire if I must." Meanwhile, far to the south in King's Landing, Tywin Lannister stood before a massive painted map, flanked by his generals. His golden lion ring glinted as he pointed to the north with icy precision. "We cut him off at the throat. If Robb Stark has reclaimed the neck, then we march before he can reinforce Winterfell." Pycelle cleared his throat. "But my lord, winter slows all movement. Armies will freeze before they fight." "Then let them freeze," Tywin growled. "So long as they die, I'll not let another Stark crown gather dust on a dead boy's brow." Cersei, lounging nearby, swirled wine in her goblet. "The boy is becoming a legend, father. The more battles he wins, the harder it will be to break his image." "Then we'll break him," Tywin said. "Not with battles, with betrayal." He nodded to a servant who brought forward a sealed letter stamped with a mockingbird. Littlefinger, Lord Baelish has made promises. The Vale may still be neutral, but Peter knows how to twist arms and tongues. The Eyrie can be bought, or forced. Back in the north, Robb's march to Winterfell was slow and bitter. Snow fell constantly. Supplies ran thin. Men died of cold in their sleep. But when they finally crested the hill and saw Winterfell again, blackened, broken, but still standing, a hush fell over the army. The Stark banners had been stripped. Bolton flags now flew from the towers. Robb stared at them, his heart thundering. Even from a distance, he could sense the wrongness in the air. Winterfell had always been cold, but now it felt poisoned. They made camp outside the castle. Scouts confirmed what Roose had hinted. Ramsay Snow, Roose's bastard, had claimed control after Theon Greyjoy's failure. He had filled the halls with his own twisted men, tortured those who remained, and ruled with madness. And yet Roose had said nothing until now.
"Why didn't you stop him?"
Robb asked that night, sitting across from Roose near the campfire. Roose looked into the flames. "Because he was loyal to me, and because I was loyal to you," Robb narrowed his eyes. "If you ever shift that loyalty again, I'll treat you like any other traitor." Roose said nothing, just nodded once. At dawn, Robb's army surrounded Winterfell. He sent one message inside, yield or burn. No reply came. Not until the gates burst open and a flayed man was thrown out, alive, screaming, skinned. One of Robb's scouts. Ramsay's answer was written on the corpse. No, the battle for Winterfell began before nightfall. Catapults flung fire over the walls. Archers darkened the skies. Ramsay's men fought like cornered beasts, but they were no match for the rage of the north. By the second day, the gates had fallen. Robb led the charge inside himself, grey wind by his side, blood and snow mixing underfoot. He found Ramsay in the great hall, laughing, shirtless, blood smeared across his chest like war paint. "So the wolf comes home," Ramsay grinned. "Will you flay me like I did your men?" "No," Robb said, stepping forward. "I'll bury you." They fought with swords, steel clashing in the ruins of Ned Stark's hall. Ramsay was fast, unhinged, but Robb was patient, controlled, and in the end, when Ramsay slipped on the icy stone, Robb drove his sword through the bastard's throat. It was over. Winterfell belonged to the Starks again. As Robb stood in the Godswood that night, snow falling like silence, he looked up at the red leaves of the weirwood tree. "We're home," he whispered. But in the distance, another raven took flight, heading south, and war, ever patient, waited again. The fires of Winterfell crackled through the night, warming halls that had been cold and hollow for far too long. The soot-stained stones still carried the scars of Theon's betrayal and Ramsay's cruelty, but life was returning, slowly, stubbornly. Robb Stark walked through the courtyard, watching his men raise the broken portcullis, patching holes in the walls and clearing out frozen corpses left behind by the Bolton filth. It was no longer just a castle. It was a wound being stitched closed. One stone, one breath at a time. Mr. Lewin's old Raven Tower had been rebuilt, and from there new messages flew daily, to White Harbour, to Bear Island, to every northern house that had not yet pledged its banners again. And from most of them, the replies were the same. The North remembers. But remembrance wasn't enough. War still loomed, and Robb knew it. He stood before his father's grave that morning, snow piling in his hair. "I've retaken our home," he said quietly, "but I still feel like a boy pretending to wear your armor." His voice trembled slightly, not with weakness, but with the unbearable weight of expectations. "They look to me as king, but I wonder if I was ever meant to be one." Behind him, Catelyn spoke softly. "You never asked for this crown, Robb. But you wear it because no one else could, not like you." He turned, meeting his mother's eyes. "Do you regret it?" he asked. She didn't flinch. "Every day." "And yet, not at all." Robb nodded. "I'm riding to White Harbour. Lord Manderley has the ships. We'll need them soon." Catelyn's expression tightened. "And then?" We take the fight south. Tywin won't stop until we bleed. I won't wait for him to bring the war to our door." In White Harbour, Lord Wyman Manderley received Robb with open arms, and more than a little relief. The old lord had long awaited the return of Stark leadership. He fed the king's host, clothed their wounded, and pledged all his ships and soldiers without hesitation. But he also brought news. "The Lannisters are stirring," he said over a roasted boar feast. "The ravens say Tywin has sent envoys to the Vale, even Dorne. He wants to choke you without ever lifting a sword." Robb sipped his ale and leaned forward. "And the Vale?" "Lord Robin is still under his mother's thumb, and she's as paranoid as ever. But Baelish has her ear." "Littlefinger," Robb muttered, disgust curling his lips. "I'd sooner trust a snake." "Then don't," Manderley said, "but you might need his tunnels to avoid the lion's claws." Robb didn't answer right away. He was thinking, weighing every risk. He knew the North could not win this war alone. The Lannisters had coin, soldiers, and worse, reputation. But Robb had something else: rage, memory, and winter. Meanwhile, in Dorne, the Raven had arrived. Prince Doran Martell sat beneath the shaded arches of the Water Gardens, scroll in hand, eyes narrowed. The Lannisters wanted his support, a gesture of unity after years of silence following Elia Martell's murder. "They ask for peace," Doran murmured. His brother, Oberyn, standing shirtless beside a fountain, snorted. "They ask for obedience, they always have." "They fear Robb Stark more than they admit," Doran said. "A boy they tried to assassinate in secret is now the king they cannot kill." Oberyn approached, smirking. "Then perhaps it's time Dorne remembers too." Doran didn't reply immediately, but he folded the letter slowly, very slowly. "Perhaps." Back in Winterfell, a new raven arrived. Catelyn opened it herself. Her hands trembled slightly as she read the words aloud in the war room to the gathered lords. "King Joffrey Baratheon invites King Robb Stark to King's Landing for peace negotiations, under truce." Silence fell like ice across the room. "A trap," Roose Bolton said at once. "A Lannister game," muttered Lord Karstark. "They'd poisoned the wine before the first word was spoken." But Catelyn held the letter up again. "It's signed by Joffrey, sealed with the royal crown, and also signed by Sansa Stark." Robb froze. "Sansa?" Roose stepped forward. "Could be forged." Catelyn shook her head. "No, that's her writing." The room darkened with tension. "Then she's still alive," Robb whispered. His hand closed into a fist. If they had Sansa, if they were using her, then the game had changed. "I will not go," he said, "but I will answer." The next raven flew south the next day, to King's Landing. And the reply was simple: "The North will not kneel. We will not forget, and we will not come quietly." But in the shadows of Winterfell, a hooded man watched the ravens fly. His eyes were dark, his face thin. A coin spun between his fingers. He turned to leave the castle before anyone noticed he had been there at all, and whispered to himself in a strange, foreign tongue, "Valar Morghulis." The snows no longer melted, not even under the midday sun. Winter had claimed the north in full, burying roads, freezing rivers, and testing every man's endurance. But in Winterfell, fires roared inside the great hall, and war drums echoed once more. Robb Stark stood before the carved wooden table, once his father's, a map of Westeros spread before him, pin-pricked with tokens. Wolves marked the north. Lions ruled the south, and in between, chaos. "Your sister's letter changed things," Roose Bolton said quietly. Robb didn't look up. His eyes were fixed on King's Landing, jaw clenched. "She's being used," he said. "They want me to come south, to bend the knee, to beg." "And if she's not being used," Catelyn asked, "if she truly sent that letter knowing what it would provoke?" Robb exhaled, slow and shaky. "Then they've broken her worse than I imagined." Rose leaned over the map. "The Vale is moving. Littlefinger's forces are gathering near the bloody gate. He's too clever to commit, but he's watching, waiting. And the Lannisters? Robb asked. Marching, 3 legions. Tywin in the west, reinforced by the Reach. Catelyn stepped forward. We can't fight them head on, Robb. You'll be crushed. You need something unexpected. Robb nodded. We won't fight them head on. We'll fight them here. He pointed to the map, the trident. 2 weeks later, under a moonless sky, Robb Stark's army moved south again. This time, they marched with purpose. Not to conquer, not to siege, but to bleed the lion where it least expected. At the trident they met them. Tywin's men, proud, golden, arrogant, came thundering through the snow, expecting to face tired northern wolves. Instead, they met traps in the trees, fire from the river, spears rising from frozen mud. The North had learned. The North had adapted. The battle raged for 3 days. The river ran red again, just as it had during Robert's rebellion. But this time, it wasn't Robert Baratheon who emerged victorious. It was Robb Stark. Grey Wind limped by his side, bloodied but alive. Lord Karstark had fallen. Dozens of noble houses had lost heirs. But Tywin Lannister was gone. Not dead, not yet, but captured. He was found beneath a pile of corpses, wounded, delirious, trying to command phantoms with a broken sword. Robb had him dragged before the men, tied to a stake in the snow. You sought to end the North in silence, Robb told him, with whispers and betrayal. Tywin looked up with a smirk, even as blood stained his teeth. And yet, here you are, still not a king. I never wanted a crown, Robb replied, only justice. He turned and walked away. Tywin Lannister was not executed. He was not tortured. He was sent south, chained to King's Landing. Carried by raven and rumour alike, the message was clear. The North would not be silenced. In King's Landing, chaos reigned. Joffrey screamed for vengeance. Cersei wept at her father's defeat. The small council fractured. And in the shadows, Varys whispered, "The boy has fire in him. Honour, too. But fire doesn't always win wars. It only burns." At Winterfell, ravens flew again. From Dorne came a promise. "We remember Elijah," Oberyn Martell's message read, "and we remember those who protected their own." From the Vale, silence, but no betrayal. Lysa Arryn closed her gates. But Littlefinger? He had vanished. Some said he was riding north, others said he fled east. Robb didn't care. He stood once more beneath the heart tree in the Godswood, snow falling like feathers around him. Catelyn stood beside him. "You did what they said you couldn't," she whispered. "You lived, you fought, you won." Robb looked up at the red leaves and said, "I survived, but at what cost?" His voice was not bitter, only tired. The kind of tired that comes from burying too many brothers, losing too many pieces of yourself to war. "You're still here," Catelyn said. "That's more than most." Behind them life bloomed again in Winterfell. Children laughed, soldiers trained, the North healed. That night, Robb Stark sat alone in the great hall. No crown on his head, no feast before him, only silence, and a letter. A fresh raven had come, this one sealed with black wax and a white tree, from Castle Black. Jon Snow had written only 5 words, "Something is coming from beyond." Robb folded the letter slowly. The war with the South had ended in blood and frost, but now a colder war awaited, and this time no man would fight it alone.